Yeah. Oh, critique. That sounds so,
Well, not a
yeah,
critique, but I guess like,
art school critique.
Oh God. Well, I feel
Are
like
you
this work.
stressing? Are you sweating?
No, I think it's just really interesting. I have like a weird relationship with this work. I think every time I go back to it, there's so many things that I realize about myself, and I realize about just more about my sex work practice, more about just how connected I am to religion, because I think I'm more spiritual than ever. And I think this period of time for me, I was still denying that I had religion at all. Like I ran away to New York so I could get as far away from it, far away from my parents, as far away from the place where I learned it. And then ended up finding me in the thing that I really love to do. And it was like grappling in some cases because at the very end of my thesis, like I had recognized like, oh, this is part of my play. This is part of why I seek fantasy. I feel like for me, it's best if you ask me like specific questions. Because I feel like from our last talk, I could get very like I get a little spacey, and I don't think I answered the question directly.
Space is good.
This is
Space is
good.
good. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's part of the question also of fantasies, especially if that's something that I hear that is very important for you, then why would you be specific when that abstraction is an important part of your life and your search?
I think because sometimes I just don't want to admit to myself how oppressed and abusive my whole experience was in life. Oh God, I hope I don't get emotional. But yeah, it's fantasy is freedom. Fantasy is accepting almost like the greatness of your suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're reaching a high. You're reaching like going through all this pain, all this like denial of oneself is just like peeking through. I feel like the way I can describe it is like the light at the end of the tunnel, and like you're just fantasizing like when I get out of this tunnel, it's gonna be amazing. I don't have to sit and wonder anymore how long I'm gonna have to walk for. Like that's the ending, and this is like where it is for me.
You could really feel that, and I think that's what's exciting about the work, because I get that sense what you're talking about, the bondage that you feel that was and continues to be there, but within that constraint I can sense your freedom inside that. And I think that's what hearing about that's what's very exciting, because it's very energetic. It's like that pressure building that creates the diamond, right? Like it's so,
Yeah.
you really sense the pain and the history of pain that is held, that then is communicated or sublimated, produced through doing this process.
I mean, I think if I relate it back to just sort of photo itself, photo is defined by borders, defined by a frame, and also it's like a symbol. You see that as one thing, and you determine sort of what it means to you. It's so subjective. I was thinking about before our talk also how my drawing influences came from when I learned graphic drawing. And it's funny that I stick with black and white because I always felt the work I was very good at drawing was with graphite. On tone paper, just black and white chalk. That was like the most simplest things. Just really simplifying it to make something very abstract was so interesting to me. And also I learned lighting that way because our professor, she was very classical. And so our art school was just only traditional master painters, drawers, that did studies. And so she would always say that the best lighting is always one source. And this is what all the masters use. It's like what we previously talking about. It's like this template, where we copy our images. And I learned that through drawing. Another interesting thing that I learned when, because drawing is an illusion. Drawing lines don't exist. This is what my professor said to me. Lines don't exist in drawing. Lines only exist when light meets shadow. And I thought that was the most beautiful thing because that also describes how an object is not real without light. Once you put light on it, then it activates. This whole, photo is light painting. So maybe that's just like this sort of materiality of it in relationship to my drawing. And I wanted to be an fine artist, but I realized I couldn't render things in real life in the best of my abilities. And when I mean best of my abilities, I just didn't feel they were attainable. And photo has this attainability where it's like, okay, that's something from real life. And there's something also even stranger when it's not conventionally how you represent it. That's the exciting part. That's the tension that I like, because I feel like when my hand is in the process, like actually drawing the object. And another interesting about drawing objects is that I learned was that she described it as walking this object like an ant. You move the strokes of your pencil to the form of the object. And that's very sensual, in all this sense. But I think because my hand was physically touching pencil to the paper to make this object, I think already inserting myself in it it was just too far out for me in terms of like this fantasy. So I think photo is that good medium where I'm not actually rendering the image, I'm just manipulating it within this time frame.
You retain a lot of that graphite quality in the photo work. I'm curious about the that relationship that you have with the image or with a scenario or a situation.
I think I've never experienced having many bodies in one space. I think there's this idea of filling space in a frame, and the more bodies you fit in the frame, the more actually it's easier for me, because that compression that happens in a photo makes it even more obscure. So actually having one body is a lot more difficult than having several bodies because it's like a flattening, right? That was another thing that I learned in my art school, was that my professor hated photo. Thought it was the kill of all fine art. And she didn't like certain graphite drawings that imitated photography because she was like, what's the point of drawing it if you could just photograph it, And so she always also said that, like, because the photograph is a flat object, it's not as sculptural as drawing or painting, because the aspect of moving in the way of capturing the object through its form. But like, I play with depth a lot in my work because I understand that flattening in photo. And so that's why I call it compression of bodies. Like all of them are like stacked on each other, because I think that's this concept of just like hiding faces. It's the easiest way to do it in my mind, instead of like, typical like crop the head, but also just like obscuring it with something like either a shadow or either a body part. And that's kind of why it makes these sort of like windows. The body frames another window for you to look through, which is like this very penetrative thing. You're also like looking through something to find what's behind the thing I obscured in front of you. And so one of my professors said, it was like, wow, you're really like setting veils, you're like putting these layers in the photograph itself for us to sort of like find our way through. That's a really exciting part about how I love to compose images, or how I like to think about them, in terms of like, what is the hardest way I could get you from knowing what something is actually happening in the photo.
I love that. How did you describe it to find the furthest point from what is actually happening?
it's a manipulation of space. I think that's what's so interesting. It's not actually manipulating the object itself, but manipulating where you actually are. And I think maybe that's connected to sort of like why, fantasy is not about living it. It's like questioning it.
I have that same desire. Depends on the situation or the time or the people that are involved.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also working quite a lot with model agencies and things like that. And with that, a lot of times it comes in a situation where, I mean, now I think I would be in a very different situation, but the business of working with other people and then being functioning within a capitalistic system, I found it oftentimes very difficult because dealing with agents, they want their part in it, which is
Mm-hmm.
an exchange for the time, for their faces. And if I was being the guy that takes photos where I'm also playing this game of obscurity, the model and the agent would be eventually very quickly become very resentful towards me because I'm not delivering what they want, which is
Yeah.
to present a reality of sorts. But I also love this game very much. For me, it was a part of escapism or to be someone that I'm not. I think for me, there was a lot that was like unexpressed desires or situations that I didn't
Mm.
know, that I didn't feel comfortable expressing or know that it even exists or to play with. So I'm kind of fascinated how for you in a different mode and different time space, you're also exploring much more what I think I was trying to pretend to do, but you're actually doing it.
Well, I think you did it. I think maybe it was just, restricted a lot because of what you had to do to survive. And maybe that
Yeah.
survival instinct kicked in where it's like, okay, what can I do to make this something that I also enjoy, but I know I hate the situation right now. And so let me do my best to make it sort of work. Like, I don't think you fully gave up yourself because the
Did you hate the
aspect.
situation you were in here?
What do you mean?
You mentioned that sometimes you hate the situation that you're in, but you don't
Well,
mean the photographic moment itself. You mean like life in general?
oh yeah, I made this body of work in so much despair. There was a lot of self-hatred. I was like working through some sexual trauma. Also, like the environment in school when I kept showing my work, it wasn't very well received. I was actually being talked about behind my back by just a few people that didn't like the work, that thought I was just all about shock factor. And so moving through my internal space of just like, okay, a few things happened. I can't fully pinpoint why I feel so off in my body. And then on top of it, hearing in the background my work is just not something no one wants to see. But I thought I did it well. I thought I always executed in a way that had this mystery and this sort of beauty because I can't really recap everything that I experienced to its specific details. I think I take sort of actions. Also, at the same time, if I'm dissociating, it becomes like you're watching everything happen in front of you. And so to be this voyeur and to also not necessarily like remake all these images in relationship to what happened to me, but to remake it so then I could approach it to remember and understand like why I'm so disconnected with myself and like my trauma. So this is why maybe that's like, and also another reason why the religion scenes came up. Like I didn't know I was making them until like I was showing the work and everyone was like, wow, this looks like a ritual. Like, why is there only one person dressed and the rest naked? Everything in religion is like power dynamics. And so, like, I've been always looking at that. That has always been an example in my life. I never completely understood it. I just knew that there was a formula. And if I followed that formula, then I could get to what I was actually wanting to face in myself.
Wow. I think a lot of times it's so great when you can catch that wave of action and, we can leave the explanation and theorizing for the critics later. It's admirable to hold that pain and continue through that despite that process because it's a hard burden to carry.
Mm. Well, this is what I noticed, and I think this is why it's really funny. I'm so spiritual now, is because all my life I was meant to not tap into my intuition. And I think all photographers are very intuitive, you know? They look at something, they know what's good in their gut feeling, and they capture it, you know? That's what I think, like, all photographers that I end up talking to, I think are very intuitive. And so I think at that, in this point in my life, making this work, I was just feeling it, you know? I wasn't actually thinking about it a lot of the time because I couldn't think. I think I was so numb to the point where I was like on auto drive. And I think that's why I made this work in the most like darkest period of my life because I don't think I was like allowing myself to feel in my head, but moving through it in the body way and being like, okay, this is what I feel I'm interested in right now. I'm going to put it all in one space. And then, like, I just never knew what was going to happen. It was like, come in, people that don't know each other, all my friends that never met each other that go nude in one space. And it's like, all right, let's go. I don't know what I'm going to put you, but you seem like the person to be down there. You seem the person to be up there. Oh, grab the skirt. Great. That's perfect. Stay there. And then I like just shot around it. That was like my process. I just positioned them and I just started shooting. And, they didn't know how to model. They didn't know how to like move. And also, like, probably their first time being naked in front of people that they didn't know just for a shoot. So, like, I was also like taking in, like, okay, I'm not gonna like stress about that. I just have to get the shot. And so they're not awkward anymore, or so they're not like feeling insecure of themselves, because I think you could also feel that as well in space.
Well, that process and experience or the record of the innocence and the ritual itself, I think is something that makes it so special. And just to kind of go back to my rant opening today, is that like as things get more professional in terms of what is the correct way to do things, that's where I find all of it becomes very dead, and because it's moved away from the space of intuition, and I think the process of photographic process that you described is like a liberating experience compared to the process of deep consideration for other forms of art or depiction, because then you're not having to remain on a conscious repetitive act that you have come to acquire through incredible amount of mastery and dedication. And I think that's what's so great, because what is happening for me is that how I see it with you here is that, like, you went through and retained the trauma and the history compressed through all that you've been through and all that you've processed, all that you are unwilling or unable to fathom or to vocabularize. And
Mm.
it comes out in this perfect, spontaneous situation. And I think for me, that is the value of the work that you're doing, as opposed to the complaints that I was having about like recreation or, the advertising scenario, where that is not art. That is a commercial well considered, and it's a colonializing format. It's
Mm.
stealing from the experiences and development of others, of indigenous forms. By indigenous, I mean a situation or people or experiences that were happening. And it's the colonializing of humanity by capital. So
Mm.
the capital seeks out capital, as in, like, imagine, like, I like the kind of, if you allow me to go as far as a kind of psychoanalytic reflection on the movie The Terminator, where the future, uh, and where it's humans against machines,
Mhm.
and machines, we put, these, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger or something like that, as a representation of the machine. But I would argue that, aside from machine seems to be just more of a physical manifestation of the concept. And what is the concept? I would suggest that here perhaps it's capital, that it's capital, say finance, that consumes all, right?
Mm.
And here I would say, to me, here's a big jump. Let's say your image or your situation and the moment that you were in that situation in this picture, right? Here with the friends. This is almost like, the kid in Terminator 2, where he has no idea about what was to come, yet the future eventually slowly starts to disintegrate, comes in on the past. And that's when you have advertising situations where they continuously create reference decks. And what's
Mm.
kind of circular about it is that today we all have to bow down no longer to the church, but to the altar of finance. And so the greatest dream that any artist can hope for, aside from finding representation or whatever, but for photography, a lot of cases, is that you could create something and that it will be consumed and devoured by capital, and so that the image and the situation can be recreated into, even like, not just advertising, but even like shitty TV shows, like, what's that dumb movie Sense8, or all those like Netflix sci-fi films,
Yeah.
Stranger Things, or this like end of the world bullshit, pseudo dystopian kind of thing. Technology in the future will kill us, and then they always have like really cool set design and whatever. But there's no real humanity or underlying experience. It's just a regurgitation of all that's happening.
Yeah. Well, photo to me, and this is why I haven't stopped shooting. I can never stop shooting, and I think photo is just my therapy. Photo is like the only space that I can occupy that feels like it will accept me for me, wherever that is, wherever I end up seeing. But I think it's also another skill, and I find it really hard for me, which is like all these other commercial photographers that I've met, where it's like it's very easy to make, or like their only knowledge, and this is like in the language of commercial photography, is to create a very sharp, detailed, direct viewpoint of what they're photographing. Like it's just there. Everything but themselves is just in that photograph. And I think that's
Yeah,
something I can't dissociate myself from photo. And I think that's the one thing that makes me realize why I can't be a photographer in this commercial fashion world, because at the very end of the day, and people have said this is good because it's like that's what everyone wants. Everyone wants to see a style and a character. But to do the commercial work, the e-com work, you have to remove yourself. And I don't think it's possible for me to do that. I don't know how I would see myself if I didn't have photo as a reflection. So really that's why I'm so deeply involved in it. I have to schedule it in my planner of doing one personal shoot for myself because if I don't, I go insane. I literally do think I'm gonna die. Like it doesn't matter what it is. If it's on my phone and it's like I'm actually sitting in front with this object, it's like it's just kind of like my own communication with myself.
Hmm. Do you did this create incite anger in people?
Yes. Well, I think it also just showed how little everyone understood about me talking about uh, just being fetishized as an object, being, just being an Asian woman in general. We deal with a lot of objectification and fetishization. And so that's here I am again with my own personal experience of that. I know what it feels to be an object of desire and to be an object, that was like within my sex work when I was a sugar baby. I like knew how to play that role very well, you know? And I was like, okay, how do I represent that in a photograph? How can I convey that in a frame? And so it was just about body parts, removing them with shadows. There was like something about shadows to me that play a role in cutting up the body and also using these parts of or like objects that are erotic, and isolating them. So I feel like hair is such an erotic material to use, and so is rope, and so is like you don't see what I'm holding, what the person is holding in the hand, but it was a dried fig. I bought like dried figs because I wanted it to represent sort of just like testicles. Um, but here's another fun part about it is that like I could have these objects, but they don't have to be fully readable. They don't have to actually like
Yes.
be considered something that you can look at it and be like, oh, that's a fig, that's hair. No, you don't really know what that object is. And I think again that obscuring and also placing it in a place where I felt like was always censoring an area that didn't feel like it need to exist in the first place.
This is so exciting. I think it what really reveals here in terms of people's reaction. Furthermore, your own experience, right? Like having to know firsthand, to see and to experience being the object of fetish, of desire, orientalized. And yet, what is interesting is when you actually depict and objectify and sexualize and fetishize yourself kind of through this process and seeing the reaction, it's kind of the perfect situation for a paranoid person. It's like, because it kind of, it's perfect because if you didn't do this, right, and you just lived your life in our modern society, but you still become a sugar baby and you do all these things and you see what you see, right, and then you say to your peers and your surroundings and say, hey, I think I experienced these things and about fetishization, about sexual objectification, and so on and so on. And I would say generally people they might admit to it, and now it's a little bit different with what happened in the world and
Mm.
with the shootings, everything. But I would say a lot of times I suspect that people might not really be down to speak about that because it is a heavy topic. It's easy to remain in the world of a paranoiac, but then the worst and the best thing to happen is for you to create such a strong kind of self-replication of that experience. And I think what's great about that is this process where you take back that power, right? So you do
Mm.
that on yourself or on your own terms, and then and I would say even more masterfully done than what you might have kind of seen or have gone through, because I think this is it's a incredibly powerful work. And then to see people's violence towards it, I think like what a trip. Because
Yeah.
you know, like if it's like wait, so you're saying that this is, you know, you it stirs something in you, right? But if we were to have like a more toned down version, and then you know that's happening elsewhere, then it's like no, it's fine, but then you do it to yourself and people get upset, then it's like, well, what does it say about you, and what does it say about our society and how we see things? We sense it but we don't dare to say it's like it's the invisibility of violence. It's like there is violence, you know, there is
Yes.
violence in nature, and so let's say like that's what's crazy about like you know the ideology and the rhetoric today. So like let's say you have weapons manufacturers, right? And they would develop new weapons, and even governments that would say like we're going to have a war that is smart, and bombs that are less violent, or you know like they have these like double think.
Mm.
And so the violence is not the act itself, but the way that we try to continuously lie to ourselves. And then when you actually show it as it is, people are almost so upset. And it's not about the act, it's almost about the fact that we are all supposed to not say the thing it is. We're not supposed to reveal what is actually there. We have to just kind of sugarcoat everything. And so,
Yeah.
what is really fascinating is when you go and do the thing, it upsets people. Then I think that's the most exciting part, at least for me as a provocator. That you know, and then it's also terrible for my paranoia because I'm like, holy shit, I wasn't crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these thoughts that like, oh, I think I have a feeling that if I recreate this, even if it's totally in the realm of say fantasy or you know an artistic portrayal, you know, with in imagery here and especially your work, I would say it's very much dancing in the world of metaphors. Yet it incites the kind of anger, mob frustration or reaction or you know condemnation. I think that's the most exciting thing possible.
For me, like how old I was, like young, 21, thinking about also the way I felt gaslit in my own class. Like I was literally like, I mean, I didn't say I was going through like sexual trauma. Like I didn't say I was doing sex work, but I was kind of like showing all these pictures and then getting critiqued on it and being told that why I shoot like a man, like why are my women, yeah, someone said that in my critique and it really turned me off. And I was just kind of like, this is very strange because I am a woman of color, and I'm making these images that men have made or men had supposedly had made from they had the right to make. And this is my perspective, and I get told I shoot like a man. And it was so offensive. I think I think my critiques caused a lot more tension because it was something that people didn't ask, like they didn't consent to see this work. They just thought in art school you're just gonna be seeing like, whatever. But like
Wait, they somebody said that they didn't consent to seeing this work.
no, but I just think like, the people like think about it. We're all 20 fucking 1 years old, like just coming into class and then like pow, you just see naked people and like these scenarios and you're just like, what the fuck is going on? Like you're obviously like this person's psycho, and that's how it read. It was like sort of like they've never been exposed to something so I don't know, real or like so like close to reality, but it's like a joke in some way. I don't know, but like I think it was that like a lot of them felt like it was not something they wanted to see, and it was also something they didn't want to confront. And I also realized some of the women in my class actually had a lot of sexual trauma in their experience, and so one of them had told me that it looks like a rape. A few of my images looked like rape, because like the woman is incapacitated. They're just like, they're one down this PDF. There's a woman.
Should we move to the
Uh,
next one?
yeah.
You want to refer to this?
Oh no, not that one. But this one's fun.
Oh,
This one
I love this picture.
Oh, okay. So I think
But you
here's
want to
another
talk about, you want to continue with the, so,
the violence. No, no, it's okay. Just keep going. I feel like when I look at images, it just reminds me of like what I was actually thinking about. So obviously I was very influenced by the surrealists. Like definitely was looking at work constantly in the 30s and 60s, like I was so interested in how they worked with shadow and also how they worked with objects. I think the idea of that symbolism in
mm,
objects relate to sort of how I like it's like making my own symbols, right? And so I have this obsession with the number three because it is the Trinity. It is the Trinity. It's like one figure split into three parts. And so I knew the surrealists loved eggs. The yonic symbol is of a woman vagina. And I didn't want it to be, and because I was shooting black and white, I was like, oh, I don't want it to be in a positive form. When you switch to a negative, it's black against white, not white against black. And so I was like, okay, what if I invert the symbol? So instead of being out as like this is a very conceptual thought. Instead of being out as an egg, like meaning white, I wanted to kind of go inside. And so I wanted to be inverted to a black. So then it's consumed in darkness. And I placed it on the stomach because I wanted to have this triangle. And what I learned in drawing school was that the Renaissance and all the masters did their compositions in relationship to the triangle because it was in relationship to the Trinity. So I was so obsessed with it, because I think when I was in that process, I wanted to take that, simplify it, make it my own, and then on top of it, put it on a body and make it the strangest thing ever. This was actually shot in an old equipment studio. Like I think the photo studio at that time, there was this other room and then there was this door. And so I pushed the door and I realized it was like this empty office space where the floors were just like teared up. There's these wires. And I was like, this is the most beautiful space for a murder. And so like I was just like, okay, like the scene itself was already, it had the character to it. And I think all I had to do was just like, add my friend and add these eggs. And
it's beautiful. It's just stunning.
what did you, okay, I guess like now that I've told you, I'm very curious of what you see because I know what came of this image, but I never really know how someone approaches it.
I think it's important that you speak about your obsessions that is manifesting in the image itself, because that just gives me more dimensions to the reading. It's important to just for me to just take it in, and it's like a dream. It's not to. A lot of
Mm,
times it stirs a certain sensation in the psyche, and maybe we have shared relationships to certain symbols. Maybe we don't,
mm,
but that's okay. And not everything has to be literally explained and conveyed. But I think it's still an interesting conversation in terms of the spirit in which it portrays. So that's enough.
okay. Maybe
But
I'm still in this phase where I need this validation. I think
yeah,
that's
but I think that's just
maybe.
a reaction from art school trauma. That's just you having to deal with a condensed amount of extreme competitiveness and envy from the people around you.
Yeah. Also
So,
in my critique, what I did was that we weren't allowed to talk about our work. Everyone had to say
oh,
something about it. Yeah.
well, that's kind of dumb.
Well, it was kind of fun because then it just showed how
It
people
shows more about
were.
other people than yourself, but
Yeah.
which I think that's a real danger. I mean, I think as an artist, fine, whatever. If you wish to ascertain training and a certain type of maturity, sure, that's a phase. But I love the story and the system of Zen training. There's this idea that you train 10 years with a master,
Hmm.
then after the 10 years, you are basically kicked out of that relationship with your master. Then you have to go and live life for 10 years. Now, this 10 thing, this is just like a kind of rough estimate and minimum really, but just as a guide. And the final true test is one day you shall meet some other master or an opponent or something, and the ultimate test of life is that you shall have a tea ceremony before you fight each other to the death or something like that. Of course,
Mm.
I'm way oversimplifying. My point being is that the 10 years in training and all these things, like, that's nothing, and not nothing, but that's, you haven't even started. And I think so often, if we can survive those years of the initial immense chaos and still carry on your practice, whatever that may be, life is long and it's more interesting. I'm not so interested in child geniuses. I think it's much more interesting to see what a person develops and retains. And I think you're going through that, and I think whatever the fears that you have from that period, it's understandable, but that's, I wouldn't keep too much of that in terms of like it becomes your MO in terms of dealing with the world, because most people in the world are not your class colleagues who are out for blood and
That's true.
fighting for the same pathetic amount of the 1% to dole out the sponsorships, right? It's like we're all trying to please the Medici family and trying for the life of God to get some kind of sponsorship. But I think that's such a delusion that puts you in such a, it's something that is often a false sense of support, like, I mean, I love that documentary with, I don't know why I'm so obsessed with Arnold Schwarzenegger today, but that, have you seen that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, the one
No,
where he tries to compete for Mr. Universe?
no, I haven't.
So there's
That's
a
real.
beautiful scene. It's a beautiful kind of lens on psychology where the young Arnold Schwarzenegger was competing for, he won like Mr. Universe 7 years in a row. That
Mm.
itself is an accomplishment already. But what was interesting was he was up very tight against his friend, and his friend. I mean, I don't know shit about bodybuilding. They all look incredible. I really can't tell the difference. It's the same with like ballet, this ice skating.
Yeah.
The it's like 7.9, and you're like, why? It looked, but I have no idea. But what was interesting was Arnold would have all these mind games that he would constantly fuck up his buddy that he was competing with, and he would just like slip in little funny things, like just before like having a nap or something, he'd be like, "Oh, have you been working out your abs? Because it's looking kind of like what." Like he would just drop in tiny little things that he knew that the other guy would be insecure about, and then he would go and take a
Mm.
nap, and then the other guy's like freaking out, and then eventually, because the other guy's not aware of it, it kind of starts to show, like cracks in his armor when he's going up on competition. And
Mm.
so, I envy is a crazy thing, and we're often envious not of the queen but of our neighbor upstairs, you know, because of the
Mm.
proximity. And so it just sounds to me like a lot of nasty competitiveness that yeah, I hope that you slowly don't have to keep holding on to that. But at the same
Yeah,
time, I think it's an interesting drive because there is this like competitive, like I'll show them kind of mentality. But
yeah, it did make me like make even more crazier pictures. Like I think as the year went by, I just started to get even more frustrated and just like make things that pushed a lot of the people's buttons more.
I
But if
love that.
you
I think that's what we have in common. But is would
yeah.
this picture be something like that? Would this be an evolution as well of like
No,
what
well,
you've
this one is actually connected with the first image with the my ménage à trois. Like I've always wanted.
like this one?
Yes, that's from the same shoot. So I made like various pictures. I don't know if you could read it or if you can know it. It is of the same set, but it's the same thing. This trinity, this three people, and they're all interconnected to make one body. And I was like, yeah, this is my obsession. Like there are moments where I do repeat objects as well. Like certain forms, I always keep that. I don't think people know this, but like I picked this image because my friend's suntan of her boob just looked like an eye, and I was just like, "Oh my God, like this eye is staring back at me." And it was just like, we don't really know what's this man in the center and two women, as a very typical threesome fantasy, right? And well, also another thing about you don't know if this woman in the front is a woman. I think everyone thought it was very androgynous because she had short hair and you can't really see if she has boobs. But there's also this object that I placed in their hands of the two women because they're sort of helping each other. The idea of also looking away, like we talked about this censorship and redacting faces, that was another component to also the idea of how to obscure a face. That was also another reason why I really loved it. But also that no one is looking at me, and this suntan of this eye was the only thing staring back, and it was just the boob, one boob to be
Hey, that's something
exposed.
interesting I wanted to ask you with regards to one of the things that piqued my interest with regards to domination and submission is this idea that what the gaze is to be controlled by the one who is dominant.
Hmm.
And what is your relationship with your subjects and their ability to gaze back? Like here, you're saying it sounds to me this shock or disturbance to realize that there's despite having none of the people looking back at you, you have the full power, like a kind of like a prison guard, able to survey the subjects, and you make sure that none of them have that ability. But here, the boob looks back. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's like the object understanding that it's viewed. And I think that's like, we like, I have objectified my friends, they're like there for my amusement, but at the same time, it's like they know, they're fully aware of themselves as well. So it's like their sort of agency in it comes back at me. And I think maybe that's a
Mm.
little bit of a freedom where it's like, okay, like, but this is also a very safe space. Like I did try my best not to make it so awkward. I had troubles with men in my work. That was the whole issue with working with men. And I think that's the reason why I still don't work with like male nudes, is because whenever I would ask them, they would always insist I have sex with them after the shoot.
Really?
Yeah, because they were just like, "Oh, you're gonna see my nude body. That means you're into me." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. I just want to just be very professional." It was like I had issues with that, and then I've also had issues with like some guy friends making
God,
my
men are so
female
annoying.
friends. Yeah, I had some men in my shoots that have made all my female friends uncomfortable in this scene, and I didn't like it, and so I never worked with them again. I won't say which person. I feel like I don't have many men, that's why a lot of them are all women. And mostly now, if I'm going to shoot a nude male, they have to be queer. I think they're a little bit more like I can't do a straight cis man for sure. But yeah, I had issues and it caused me a lot of like stress because, I did this all very low key, and like sort of the reason why I'm really good at black and white was because it was the only thing I could afford. Like every shoot that I did was I only shot 3 rolls and all within like 4 hours. So that was like my cap. I gave myself a limit on how much film I could make. And because I had access to a dark room, I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna do all black and white because that's the cheapest thing possible. That was the only thing I could afford. So that's why my color work is not so developed. It was just too expensive to go to a lab and get it developed. It was just much easier for me to like just do it all myself. And that process is really fun. But yeah, that was, and I also was just like finding people, like everyone always couldn't make a lot of time issues, the complications and the production of all these shoots were like, this is the most, I guess, in this scene where I had 4 people. It was so hot. Like, asked my friend to use their apartment, shut the door, put all this fabric, and like, I use constant light, so it was just like this hot light in a tiny room with no windows covered, and so everyone's just like sweating. I mean, it's really funny because it's like I made like a fake orgy scene. This also not realizing I did it, but I don't think you could tell, but I used the eggs again, the inverted eggs in the center of this woman holding this like open basket. It's like this womb vase I found while walking on the streets in New York. Like sometimes these objects just come out at me and I'm just like, oh my God, perfect. And I just thought, that's the basket where my eggs are gonna be. That's the eggs that all these people desire. It's also the woman that's blindfolded, which you could barely see, but this is like sort of I guess the narrative I was thinking of. One having the most attention, everyone's putting their attention to this one person.
When you said making a fake orgy, would you shoot a situation that's a real orgy?
Oh, I would love to. Throughout my years in New York, I've been trying to find couples that are okay with me being there when they have sex. I've always been interested in like, I am a voyeur for sure. Like, I love just watching human behavior. And I think characteristics of a person really do come out when there's like
Yes.
this equal desire for pleasure. But like, I think also I think the reason why I want to do that is because I want to see the nature of sex. Where does it become consuming, where that there's not a lot of communication and one person's trying to get off and the other person is not? Or there's a collaboration where they're both feeding into their energies and moving through them. In my experience and in my personal relationships, have always never collaborated when it comes to sex. And so, it has been my ideal, like, just small project to shoot just actual scenes of people fucking. But they have to be okay with me just like setting the light and just like being a fly on the wall, like I do think like I don't know how in the mode they need to be. And it is like I have to, plan this all ahead of time. And I wonder also the logistics of getting turned on while someone is just there ready to capture anything, at this moment. And, then it becomes like this weird performance. Then we're all performing, and then it becomes I'm part of the scene because I'm there to also just capture it. So there's a lot of dynamics there that I'm really interested in. So that's why I've only set things up. And I think the problem learning from all this work about setting it up is that there needs to be, especially with people who are not want to be nude. And also like I tried to make sure they didn't touch each other in ways that made them feel uncomfortable. I faked it. I was like, look like you're going to touch her, but don't touch her, because they didn't really consent to being like naked and touched, all these like friends of mine and they're strangers, so that's a very different dynamic. So all of this is very staged.
Tell me about this one. Is this related to the
Yes, this is my sugar
allusion
daddy.
to rape?
This is my sugar daddy. He was great. He was very supportive. I gave him this picture. He wanted this picture. He loved this picture. Yeah, this is my kidnapping scene. This is, I don't know why, but definitely this is the body of Christ for me. The body of Christ in a bedroom. The same blindfold has been used in many of the people. Like, I always love, I mean, people don't know that, but I use the same objects. I didn't realize there was bondage tape. And so when I did rip, this is like a fun thing. I like, when I took off the tape, it like ripped all his hair off because it was just duct tape. So I didn't know, like going into the BDSM world, there was specific like bondage tape. So it's like, it won't stick to the adhesive of the skin. Because also I was using constant light. So like that duct tape and like the emulsion, and it was just like sitting on his skin for a while. I was like, oh God. I was like, poor thing. I felt so bad. But yeah, I asked him. The reason why I had a sugar daddy was because I wanted him to supply all the things I needed to make work that was outside of my friend's apartment. So the later half of the year, I was just like working in studios and friends' apartments, and I was like, I really want like a more isolated scene. Also to kind of have this real life experience in it, because this is actually someone that I was engaged with sexually and work wise. I told him specifics. I was like, okay, I want you to get me a love hotel with a mirror on the ceiling. That was like one of the things I wanted because I ended up taking photographs of us fucking, and obviously I showed those in class, and that was like not, and I was like, there's just like, I also strategically, this is a very quiet edit from all the work I've made through this year of thesis. It was a lot of like conditioning of my peers, my professor to make this. That's why I feel like I also had another frustration with this body of work, because it's my most complete, but it's my most censored.
Censored by who?
Censored by like me, because I knew there was an audience. My parents went to my senior opening. I was constantly showing these images, and people were reacting to them in ways. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll just make a more obscured edit. Like the editing process of this, because this turned out to be a book. I did 3 darkroom pins that were just very generic. Not generic, but just like the more simple and subversive ones.
Incredible.
Yeah. Also, by the way, to talk about objectification again, the first image that you saw with the vase, that's actually a self-portrait of me. Yeah, this
This
is
one.
my self-portrait. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a hair and a butt. No one understood that, but yeah, I feel like I have to tell people, yeah, this is my self-portrait of
Incredible.
myself. This is one of my favorite ones. This was actually a redo of an earlier thesis project, or like small photo project within my photo, like what do you call it? Yeah, education. Like my second year of the second semester of my sophomore year, I had this obsession with wrapping people in saran wrap. So it's funny because I was like really inspired by 70s performance art, and I really loved the idea of like sort of constriction and like breaking free of it. And I was like, all right, what is the cheapest material that I could buy tons of and basically wrap people in, and so they could try to get out of it. And it was really funny because that was my first sort of indication of mummification. Obviously, like my friend didn't want to be wrapped too tightly, so I had to be very generous with how I wrapped. But it's interesting because I don't know why I put her in this position, this very open, please enter me position. And my professor gave a very beautiful idea of this image where she said it is a condom that doesn't protect you, because the
Mm.
opening, the vaginal opening is like not covered. Everything else is, but the vagina. Yeah, and also this vase on the bottom reminded me. I saw it online. I was like, I have to buy it. It looks like a like those duck things they put for like gynecologists. I don't know what a scalpel is. This no, not a scalpel, but like a it starts with an S, but I don't recall the name. But anyhow, it just looked like that visually, and this sort of idea of this like bulbous shape. Again, I'm bringing back that like with the egg, everything is very like round because it is the female symbol. So I wanted to kind of have that, but also looking like it was facing up as if it's like the phallic object.
Hmm. You're
This
thinking
sort
like for
of
the vase, you're thinking that it looks like a speculum.
yes, that's what it is. Yeah. It was just a really beautiful, like just one, it's just for one flower, but it like tilted. It was just like a really beautiful object I really resonated with. And I think I also had this obsession of this idea of like the the yonic and the phallic symbol merging into one. So it's like a female and a male symbol. And so this to me, because it was bulbous and it had this upright like mouth, it just felt like both phallic
Beautiful.
and female to me. Uh,
Amazing.
yeah.
I'm really into mummification and saran wraps as well. I
You
also had a
are
I also had a session recently. It
so
was in
fun.
my in the yeah, it was in my private session. I love it. I
Me too. It's
It's so great. I love that you came about it through. I wanted to say something regarding to your self-excusing about financial restriction. I don't think that's it's not a it's precisely part of your medium, the specific conditions and situations. You don't have to excuse that or
I don't
apologize
think
for it.
but I think it's like I think I should say it because I feel like we don't talk about also how much these things cost, and I was also a
Absolutely.
student.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. But
I
I think that is but that is precisely what um because there's an assumption when speaking about the apology side of it, or like the excuse, like that. I think that reveals our own self-hate or our own classicism, where like what is not implied is like, if it weren't for this condition, it would be and sure, it would be something else or whatever it is. But I think that situation and condition is the great part about it, and is the special part, is the unique, and what makes the work strong, is that
but I
specific condition.
yeah, well, this is why like, limitations is so great for me. And
Yeah,
it's about being innovative, like
yeah.
what is something that won't break my wallet and make something just incredible and playful and just exciting and weird.
Also,
you
it's
know?
showing that it's not breaking your soul. All of these
Yes,
conditions, uh, it,
yes.
it's not in spite of these situations, but it's precisely because of these conditions that you make this specific body of work, and that's what makes it very alluring. It's not a condition that you can buy yourself into.
Yeah. No, but I just think about it, as a broke student, like could barely afford like eating proper meals, it's just like what can you do? And I think that was also exciting, but like that's another reason why I was so also depressed and that this is a
I think
very
I'm getting the sense though that in our current capitalistic dream that we live in, it's these stories that then really gets us off and excited, right? Nobody wants. Well, I mean, Damien Hirst talks about how he was surrounded by money, so he creates works of art made of money, which is kind of, yeah. There is this kind of financial arrogance, but there's also the story of Takashi Murakami, the
mm,
Japanese kind of pop artist, and he also speaks about the period where he was super broke and eating out of garbage dumps of 7-Eleven. It is the kind of thing of like the romanticization, maybe even self-romanticization. I mean, I can also remember some of the experiences that I had. Some of the quote unquote best works, whatever that means, came out of a moment of total despair, total, no money, just worse. Like, and those times, it's precisely in spite of everything, yet you did it, that creates such a power. It's very pure. It's the only things left.
Yeah, well, I think it's also just thinking like, wow, like patting myself on the back. I hated this work when I saw it. Every single day, looking at it, I hated it. There was something about it that was just so, I didn't feel like it was my best work. And then, like, looking at it now, I'm just like, oh my God, I think it's one of the greatest things I've ever
Yeah.
made. And I can't replicate
Anytime.
that era. Oh my God, yeah, no, it was really tough. I think I was really tough on myself. I also realized that there wasn't a lot of like examples of Asian photographers, that no one gave me any Asian photographers. They all gave me like, I got Ren Hong. That was the only one that they referenced, which, made me kind of frustrated too.
Why?
Um, well, this is okay. So before I made this work, I actually started with color images. And so it was at my previous professor taught at Yale. And so our first critique was actually at Yale in the beginning of this thesis work. And then it pushed me into black and white because I was just like, I don't want to ever be referenced by another male Asian photographer that does shooting friends with nudes. And so the picture I could describe it was like two of my friends against like a red fabric and a nude fabric, and compressed. I feel like I can't really describe the image, it's very abstract, but one of them wore red nails, and it was, instead of using constant, I experimented and used a flash. And I think maybe that's why I avoid flash, because I don't really like this, how easy it was to just like decide that the lighting and the red nails determined I was this photographer.
Mm.
And I felt like there wasn't a lot of room for me to like grow out of that, because I felt like I would have been pigeonholed very easily. So I went the opposite way. I was like, all right, that does not work for me. I don't want to make work like him. He already is making fantastic work. I want to try to find something that people can't decipher, you know? Well, this is my sub. I hated him. I'll tell him. Well, he knows that. If he watches this, he'll know that. He was just very frustrating. He really pushed my boundaries a lot for someone who felt like they found someone to understand them and sort of not really understanding my own pleasures. So this was my first sub ever. I knew I hated him because I duct taped his eyes, and I knew that I knew that like duct tape would like fuck you up. So I kind of did that mean thing where I was like, I'm gonna blindfold you, but I'm not gonna use a soft blindfold. I'm gonna blindfold you with duct tape. But I didn't. But I was just so angry at him that I even censored his face. Like, even though the duct tape could have like censored him, I just felt like another removal of it was just even better. Another woman who saw my work gave me a really insightful vision of this perspective, and she was like, this is the vagina perspective. And I was just like laughing so hard from it, because it's like, yeah, like shooting between my legs, from above, almost from below, like in some way in an open position. But the
Mm.
fact that in itself, he was tied up, couldn't see me, against this mirror, so I could have this like doubling effect. There was something about good. Get it out, get it out.
Oh god,
Yeah.
choke life. Uh, taking it back, but the literal vaginal gaze. Oh Christ.
No, that was, yeah. I feel like this is why I love this picture the most. But yeah, he loved feet, and so I censored him in a way where he loved my feet to be the most. So I
That's
also gave him
amazing.
what he wanted. Yeah, I also gave him what he wanted in the photograph.
That's a great balancing out of energies.
What can I say? I
Oh,
feel like This one, I made it on just yeah, but this is my only considered wet picture. It was the only picture that symbolized an ejaculation. Everyone loved this picture, but I also just recognize it's like it's so we're able to celebrate a man finishing, but never a woman finishing.
Hmm.
So I feel like, this was just like, it was a strange picture and my only wet picture, but it ended up looking, I accidentally dropped the lotion in the wrong place and I was like, this is it. I guess I can't take it back anymore. And then I just photographed it like that.
Hmm.
Um, so
God, I
all
would
of
love
it.
to. I would love to have this image as one of my book covers too.
Oh, would you? Would you?
That would be
You
amazing.
can.
Yeah.
I love this image. It's really funny because everyone celebrates it. And I just kept thinking it for the longest time. It's like, oh, it's so, it's a happy thing to see a man come
Hmm.
in my eyes. But that's like how it was.
I think it's great.
Yeah, it was in the same, I shot it at the same time I wrapped my friend in saran wrap. So after I shot her, that was a total of less than 10 minutes. And she was like, I'm hot, I gotta go. And I was like, all right, bye. And I was like left at the studio with 30 minutes to kill. And I was like, all right, I got a kiwi because I think kiwis look like testicles. And I was like, here's my base and I have some lotion. And I was just like, all right, here I'm gonna go. And I like just slammed the kiwi onto the base
Hmm.
and poured the lotion. Like I just feel like when I describe it, like to make this image, it was like I wasn't planning anything. I was like, all right, I have to have time to kill. Like, let me use it. I brought all these things and like I didn't use it on her, so I'm just gonna put it because I bought three kiwis as well to symbolize the Trinity. But in that moment, I just didn't think I needed it. I overbring materials and then I place
Hmm.
them like still lives. And then like I decide either I didn't feel like it or maybe for another time. So I was like, all right, fuck it. I have kiwis. I don't have a body, so let's make something into resembling some sort of bodily thing. And that's what happened.
I also like the way you have these slightly drooping underwear.
Yeah, I don't like underwear on the floor. I think it's much sexier when it's between the legs because that's another form of bondage.
Right. Like if it's on the around the ankles, it's more like you're taking a dump. But if
That's a
it's
that's a fair way to put it.
but if it's around the thighs, there's a kind of process in the process of in between things.
Yeah, but I think it's also like there's something about limiting the area in which you want to have access to. So in this case, you want to have access to the penetratal area. And so to keep it halfway down, there's either like there's this like wanting to rip it off, you know? There's like this sort of aggression that happens because it's like in between and you want to open it, right? You want to open things up. So, and I always think about like just hastily. I mean, maybe this is like also the sexual trauma coming up, this idea of wanting to just rip it open or that aggressive, there's something aggressive about it to me that I can't explain.
What I find interesting here is that I find that this figure seems to be the potent character despite this uh, usually, humiliating or submissive situation with the underwear. And here the man is supposed to be the potential act of penetration, but seems to be actually the most objectified and also is that a sign of impotence here and also
Hmm.
the act of being marked. What was the situation for you in this in this setup and also for this character here?
This mark, okay, so I was obsessed when I saw this mark because that was actually his tattoo. And I had resonated with it because it looks like a cut on Jesus when he's crucified.
Yeah.
So I was really like when I saw this image, when I developed it, I was like, oh my God, like there was already, I didn't even see it, and then like looking at it again, it was like, wow, that just added so much more to what was happening. And it was just funny because, like, the only time he's cut is when he's like near the brink of death. And
Yeah.
like, death is at the ending. And so the fact that he never, like, he doesn't even get hard means he's potentially useless. Well, I think there's also something really beautiful of the waiting woman. The man makes his rounds, right? But there's something about like the woman in the background just patiently waiting for her turn. And maybe that's a very violent sense of it being like, okay, I'm waiting for it to happen to me because I know it's going to happen to me. Because I'm seeing everything in front of me where I know exactly how this is going to end. And so there's a sort of like sense of giving up, this surrender.
Mm. I read it almost like opposite way, where I find like I feel like this is such a great image of our times. There's a kind of
Oh,
like, yeah, for me, there's almost like total reversal where it's first it's a female gaze of the situation, but we even within the world, you have the kind of two waiting women waiting for the service of an impotent child. For me, this figure is very pubescent, is very childlike. It does not lack potency. He's very soft in
mm,
so many aspects. There lacks very little shadow. This the one in the light. Even the hand gesture. There's something very soft about the positioning. This woman is sitting, but even her grip here seems much more empowered. It's holding with affirmation to the table, whereas this position it seems to be
mm,
placed, and there seems to be so much intrepidation. Both of these figures seems to be gazing onto this inner object that is the sacrificial Christ, but is totally powerless. For me, it's a good mirror of my sentiment on our current society. That there seems to be this like expectation for penetration, but from a totally impotent, disabled, almost, you know, figure that is being projected all of these deeds that it's supposed to do, but there, you know, I don't see anything happening from this moment on.
mm. Oh, I love that. I love the way you see it. No, I love this picture. This was also from the same set as with the bodies holding together and the one with him on the floor
Mm.
and the two women. Yeah, this is from the same set of images. I took a lot from this. There's, but like I said, I was really obsessed with three, so I think that
Yeah.
was like my key number. I shot the most in this scene.
Can you speak about the moistness on the floor?
Oh, that's just the studio that was just
Hmm.
tattered. The empty, abandoned studio. I think there's something about like this space was just really interesting. I really love abandoned spaces, but I think I also really love like destruction. Or like the aftermath of
Yeah.
things. There's something really beautiful about it. And I think it has a lot of character to set a scene. I think also it's like, every world I make is almost isolated. You kind of don't really know where they are in some
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, and the eggs. Again, I made the triangle and the I feel like this was like my first try at wanting to do shibari. Like I
Mm.
think there was a very intuitive thing happened where I just want the ankle to be connected to the thigh and the wrist to be connected to the shoulder. And there was something about this like, mimic of the arms being compressed. Also her pose is obviously a reference to a few paintings, a few traditional paintings of a woman in repose. Very, very fine art. But this was also one of my favorites. I love eggs. There's something about them that I really love. And it's funny also, like, I love seeing the negative itself because then the real egg is actually when it's not properly exposed to light. So, like I said, this sort of inverse of it, I find
Mm.
interesting in terms of like the photo aspect of it. Also, when I showed these images, the book that I made for it was tiny. I made them very
Mm.
small because, you know, when you hold an object in your hand, it becomes a fetish. And so I wanted to sort of bring that materiality and the idea of what I do think of like how to fully objectify a body is to actually have a photograph of it and hold it in your hand
Mm.
to fully wield it, you know, and then it becomes precious. And then
Mm.
that's another form of photo that I really love that I think aligns with sort of what I want to describe how I felt. And I had bought a dress to match the cover of my book, and I made the book myself, and I made the inner pages this like nude fleshy color. So when you open the book, I had this sort of like while I was showing it, matching with my dress, it was almost as if they were undressing me and opening me
Mm.
up as well. So that was
Wow.
like a no one knew that. I think I just did that for me, you know. I from the
Beautiful.
entire process of it all, I felt it was so this is so connected.
Wow. I want a copy of this book.
Oh, I only made two copies. I gave one to my ex, and I have the other one.
Wow. Should get you an exhibition going for this series.
This photo came before the fig shadow on the vagina. So this is like the actual setup of the prior. So I was what I learned in photo school and which I really take to my practice is that one of my professors taught me that every perspective, the possibilities are endless. I usually set up one thing and I rotate around it. I'm literally running around. So my
Mm.
objects don't move, I'm moving. And so I played a lot with shooting from above, shooting from below, shooting through things. And I think that is how I was able to kind of capture this sort of like voyeuristic standpoint. And yeah, so I was like in the front, I was like, oh, that was a very like direct point, and then I was wondering, what if I like faced the model that was looking away from me? What if I was actually confronting the bodies directly instead of away?
What about the wall texture? Feels almost like an asylum.
Oh wow. So that's actually shower curtains. I didn't have here's again with the, I was just like, what's the cheapest thing I could find and the most accessible thing I could find that I could put on a seamless bar easily, without having to use tape. So I just got shower curtains. Yeah, this is a shower curtain behind them. Again, I this is the first indication I did sort of rope. So I used that shoelace. This is the beginning images I shot at the very, and then like the one with the eggs, that was actually the very end. So this is like the very beginning of my thesis, and then like the eggs with the string was the end of it. So it's just also really interesting that I brought it back again just to revisit because I felt like it didn't do much here. It was more like an accent instead of like to actually bound someone in some sense. Yes, this was the rape image.
Mm. Was it upsetting for people?
Oh, yeah, because this was the most violent. It's really funny when they say this is the most violent because there's an actual sharp object directly pointing to an area of penetration. But I just thought it was really funny
Yeah, there's an
because
illusion of penetration, and then an allusion to violence, or there's a literal object of penetration, and then a hole.
yeah. Well, I also made it a little bit more like skimpy by just like pulling one of the sleeves down from her dress to also make it look like she just wasn't aware. I think there was this, and then I had to change the way my friend held her hair because this is not an aggressive grip on the hair, This is a very delicate placement. because it could be, it's like that's why I find it so strange, because I think everything else about it, like the way he's touching her, is so gentle to me. But like this was fun. I added this all on accident. We weren't shooting with it at all. I actually chose my weapon of choice was scissors.
Mm.
And it was like for her dress to be pulled up and to look like it was cutting the underwear. I think it was like there was a set of images where there was this one and then there was like the cutting of underwear, which I guess, that's why it was associated as the rape images. I loved this all. It was just the shape of an egg. It was literally what it was. I was like,
Mm.
okay, wow. It's the shape of an egg with a pointy stick. So it was
An
like
egg,
perfect.
an egg
He's
that
out of
penetrates,
an
an
egg
egg
that
that
penetrates.
pierces, an egg
Yes.
that pierces.
So so that was the whole setup of this. There were more, like I said.
Mm. That was a great series. Thank you for sharing that. That was, I think, it was a. I feel so inspired from this whole talk, and
Really?
yeah, because I haven't really contemplated on photography for so long, and then I think for me, it's when there is involvement of sexuality and a certain form of violence, that is something that is very exciting, but it's something that in today's world there's more and more censorship and more, and we're not even speaking about censorship on actual grotesque situations, but just any form of, like, it's a conceptual censorship.
Mm.
And it's, for
Yeah.
me, it's really crazy to just have to have certain emotions, certain places for the mind to go, to be completely removed from our ability to perceive. For me, this is the totalitarianism of our modern society.
Yeah, this is a body of work I've constantly been submitting for years, and it has been constantly rejected. It is also the same body of work that caused my account to be shadow banned, and it started right at the time of Sesta Fosta came into enactment.
What's that?
So Sesta Fosta, I'm so bad at. It's just sort of like a law that was passed to go and follow like sex trafficking on just on the internet, and so it actually had a lot of effect on sex workers,
Oh,
which is very interesting because it caused Backpage and Craigslist to shut down where a lot of sex workers put their advertisements to find clients, and it made them even more endangered than they were because
how do
of
you
that
spell
act.
this?
FOSTA, FOSTA slash SESTA, SETA. So only sex workers know this, but it was really funny because I didn't really do sex work yet. I mean, I broke out of it after this work. And when I had posted these images, it was funny because I was feeling the effects of how sex workers felt when that happened through my own personal work. And so I've noticed, and I've started to notice more now being in the sex work industry, of how censorship or how they push, sex workers out from the internet. And it's really quite shocking that the sex workers built the internet. They take on these applications or these websites that people don't know about. They monetize it. They work through the system to help build this website, and then once it gains sort of an attraction to a wider audience, they add these blockages to prevent sex workers from getting their money and their work. And so they have to shift and move to another platform where they could make this content to provide money for themselves. And so, that could be the case of not accepting certain debit cards anymore, or just like, just putting down like censoring sexual nudity content,
Mm.
and that really jeopardizes their income. And they just don't realize that these applications that they've been working through with sex workers get to that place by using them and then kicking them out. And so the change and shift in Instagram and the crackdown of that has also affected my work and how I view sort of even my own perspective, and also just like my identity, to be censored all my life, not to see images of myself, to be even censored in platform, you know, that is now used for work. That's like, I have to play this game now, and it's quite sad. And I think it has taken a toll on just sort of how I perceive myself, because this work is very personal to me. But it also makes me realize how so aligned I am with the sex worker community, and the fact that, you know, I wasn't even doing any of it, and I just sort of had this sort of a camaraderie with them at that time. Very insightful. It's very sad. And I'm glad to share this with you. I feel like I didn't really know how to explain Sastafesta, because when it was happening, I have a friend who does escorting, and she was sharing all this information. I think because I was still in the vanilla world, and I was so afraid to be an ally to sex workers, because I was just already ashamed of just my work and myself.
I think it's so important for awareness, and because I think it's I think also, like, yeah, it's nice to finish up on this image here too, and such a nice reflection on what's happening in your situation, and also there's a very intense congruency, as much as I don't like that word and concept for the process of art, because I think it's important that people also, yeah, there is this we are so mixed and having so many different things, but for you there is such a strong, all-encompassing relationship to the work, to you as an identity, to the history, the traumas and the backgrounds, and it really speaks for itself. And I think I find it doubly frustrating when I see as well, when in our current times of wokeism, where we are trying to give platform and speak about women's rights, racialized POC, if you will, experiences, and marginalized communities, which part of that is the sex work community as well. But on top of that, sexuality in general, where that is so
Mm-hmm.
often harvested by finance, by capital, by wokeism itself. But that's the current place that we're in. It's interesting to watch even, you know, organizations such as the CIA making advertisements right now, employing woke rhetoric, where it's like inclusivity and doing these things. And you also see, it saddens me to hear that when you speak about submitting your work and just having to go through the constant rejection, which, sure, at the same time, I think that's very much a part of the journey of any artist, especially during your initial years. But at the same time, there's a kind of double standard when it comes to the fact that unknowingly that people, the systems, be it galleries, be it institutions, wherever that, these places where, you know, they kind of give themselves the position of power to decide what gets appreciated, or what gets seen, and what gets involved in our current discussion, which I think this is very much relevant. Yet it's somehow not surprising, in terms of my, from my nihilistic or cynical perspective. It just kind of goes to show the bullshit that goes on, right?
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you sharing this with me, because I understand that, I mean, knowing the pattern in which people tend to react to you and your work must not make it easy. But I find this to be very inspiring in terms of, as an artist, just to see. I think what is exciting is I get very excited to the point, like, I could feel the sensorial kind of, like, you know, the tear ducts working, or like the goosebumps kind
Mm.
of getting ready when I see it. I noticed recently that it's like when you see something that has been under pressure for a very long time, right? Like, if you just imagine a story where, like, I don't know, just a person who for their whole life has been repressed, and they have this secret story or collection of art or something, and then through hapstance, somebody discovers it in the rubble of a war or something, and you open it and you're like, oh my god, like that. It almost doesn't matter what's in it, just the mere fact of what it had to go through to reach that point. That kind of like it's like having old aged wine or something, like when you have something so preserved, and to kind of have to know what it had to go through to reach this point is also very exciting. I think what you've been going through, and not just you, but everything around that process of who you are through generations and larger geopolitical relationships, to what you are doing, to the point where it's like, oh, I just don't have money and I want to get these random things. They're not so random, actually. Everything kind of fits perfectly together and gives a very intricate and powerful story and relationship to these symbolisms that I think creates a metaphor for our times. And so I think in that sense, it's a very powerful set of thought and story. So I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Oh, thank you. I feel like this work has always been a secret, it's always my little dirty secret.
That's what makes it exciting.
Yes, I mean, this is, I feel like in digital, like when I present my work, it's actually in the book that I made. And so there's a little bit more to it. This is a PDF submitted to just send in 10 images. The total book is around 31 images. So there's more of a story in there. But I really appreciate it. I don't think I feel like I was always so afraid to show it, and I can't show it on Instagram because they flag the photos, and it's like, it makes me so frustrated because it's like, I do know that I have an I have something to say, but I'm always silenced.
It's not just you. It's not just you. I feel like it's gotten to a point where I feel very much demotivated in so many things. I felt it's the wind has been taken out of my sails for years,
Yeah.
and it's not nothing. You're not imagining things. There is so much against you, and but I just hope that maybe we have these conversations, and that I found new energy from talking to you and seeing and having you share with me. So if that's all that there is, then that's at least worth it already. So I hope
Yeah.
you know I do think that it would be very nice to share this, and for people to kind of hear this conversation.
Well, I'm now really excited because, I think, art is just a way to really access yourself. And that's what I've been always doing. And that's why I can't stop. It's like a need, and
Yes.
that's why when it becomes like only centered just for work and for others, you forget yourself. And I never put photo for others, it's always for myself. And it has to be, or else I think a lot of the things I think about would be lost. And so to actually document them and work through them through time is one of the most special things about this medium that I love the most and will continue to do. No, thank you. I never talked about my work. I don't think anyone has ever heard about it, and to this extent, to this, to break down an image, to understand what I was going through. Thank you for holding space for me and hearing me out. It was such a pleasure.